Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Due to COVID-19, Professor Annemie Schaus, Director of the Université Libre de Bruxelles, and also until the end of March, the President of our CIVIS European Alliance could very unfortunately not be present this morning. So my name is Marius Gilbert. I'm a Vice-Rector for External Relations and Cooperation. So in her name, I would like to open this half-day conference. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you all in presence or online at this RIS4CIVIS event, which is, as you know, entitled Cross-border Research and Innovation in the European Universities Initiative. It's an honor to open this conference in this wonderful building called Le Palais des Académies, which hosts especially the Flemish and French-speaking Royal Academies for Science and Arts. And we are here in the Marble Gallery, so la Galerie des Marbres. As you know, the European Universities Initiative aims at establishing and developing transnational alliances that will become the universities of the future. The goal being, of course, to develop a strong and deep cooperation among partners in terms of their various missions, including, of course, education and research. In May 2021, the Council conclusions on the European universities reiterated the support for the European universities to achieve, I quote, the ambitious vision of an innovative, globally competitive and attractive European education area and European research area in full synergy with the European higher education area by helping to boost the excellence dimension of higher education, research and innovation. Though the European universities have been funded under the Erasmus+ program and are thus more directly linked to education, their aim is of course also intrinsically linked to research and innovation. In other words, in our case, our European Alliance CIVIS and our RIS4CIVIS project go hand in hand. They are highly complementary. RIS4CIVIS supports the research and innovation dimension of CIVIS in line with its shared integrated long-term strategy and in full synergy with its education dimension. As you know, the purpose of this event is to allow representatives of CIVIS and representatives of other pilot alliances to meet with policy experts and actors to debate and share their experiences of the reality of cross-border research and innovation. Before the keynote speech on the state of play for research in Europe by Patrick Brenier and the presentation of RIS4CIVIS by Philippe Delaporte, I would like to introduce briefly to you, who would not know it already, our CIVIS European Alliance. And so I will now present few slides presenting this CIVIS Alliance. Can you please put the slides on? Thank you very much. So CIVIS stands for European Civic University. CIVIS is one of the 17 European alliances of the first generation, funded by the EU since 2000 2019. And this first group of alliances was later on joined by 24 other European alliances selected. As the other alliances funded under the first call, CIVIS is currently in its third year funding. It's thus somehow at a turning point. Next October, so the first funding will come to an end. And last Tuesday, so 2 days ago, we introduced our application for a second period EU funding under, once again, the Erasmus Plus program, but this time 2021-2027. And this should give birth, of course, to our CIVIS 2.0, as we call it. CIVIS started in 2019, as I told you earlier, with 8 universities. Aix-Marseille Université, which coordinates the alliance, the National and Capodaustrian University of Athens, the University of Bucharest, the Université libre de Bruxelles, the Autonoma of Madrid, Sapienza, University di Roma, Stockholm University, University of Tübingen as well. And it was then later on joined by Glasgow University and more recently by the Paris-Lodron University of Salzburg. So it gathers, currently it gathers 10 partners. It brings together a community of more than 480,000 students, so nearly 500,000, 68,000 staff members, including 35,000 academics and researchers, more than 200 ERC grants and 38 Nobel Prizes. And to continue with figures, CIVIS means also 8 different languages, more than 100 faculties and schools, 700 research groups, 500 undergraduate programs, 1,500 graduate programs, among which around 500 in English. A few words about 4 CIVIS main features. Among the main building blocks of our alliance are the so-called hubs. These hubs are interdisciplinary thematic areas which really, I would say, structure our alliance. Through these hubs, the aim is to create innovative study and research programs focused on global societal challenges. So far, 4 hubs have been launched and function currently. And so these focus on climate, environment and energy, society, culture, heritage, health, and the 4th one, cities, territories, and mobility. A 5th one devoted to digital and technological transformation should be launched soon. The open labs are another important building block of our alliance. There is one open lab per partner, so one open lab per university, and these are conceived as open and collaborative spaces where universities and local citizens can meet, where they can work together on solutions to the challenges facing their city, facing their region. So the idea is really to develop co-creation, to launch creative and inclusive initiatives which can then have a positive impact on a wider community. As its name shows, CIVIS has, of course, a strong focus on civic engagement. And this focus takes various forms, which I cannot describe here. But let me just say that we see teaching, research, and engagement as forming some sort of continuum in which each element feeds the others. Last point I want to mention is our CIVIS alliances focus on the Mediterranean and African partners. 2 weeks ago in Aix-Marseille, CIVIS had a very important meeting with 6 leading African universities. So we signed together with the 6 leading African universities agreements for our future collaboration. And so as you can see, so we have those agreements with the Université Hassan II of Casablanca, Université de Sfax in Tunisia, University in Dakar, Senegal, the Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa, and last, Eduardo Mondlane University in Maputo, Mozambique. So these agreements set out ambitious plans for our collaboration in the years to come. This meeting was also the occasion for CIVIS and its 6 African partners to issue a clear call for a European University initiative open to global partnership. And this was made through a common position paper that is published on the CIVIS website. Common position paper, which I really warmly invite you to read if you are interested. So I thank you very much for your presence here in presence or online. And I wish you a very nice and interesting event, very nice and interesting discussion. And I hand over now to Yvon Mollingen from the International Relations Department, who will be our Master of Ceremony and who will present our next speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. Just a few words to say that we're now going to hear a keynote speech on the state of play of research in Europe by Professor Patrick Brunier, Mr. Patrick Brunier, advisor for the European Research Area and Open Science at the European Commission. Mr. Brunier, the floor is yours.
If I can manage to. Is it automatic? Yes,
yes,
it's automatic.
It's automatic.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor to be with such a distinguished and learned audience. When I saw the title of the speech, I thought that I would not presume and try to tell you things that you don't learn about the state of research in Europe, but rather let you understand how we, from the Commission and DG Research, a few hundred meters from here, we see things. So it's more our perspective that I would like to share with you. So for us, research has never been more prominent in Europe than now. Never have so many people expected us researchers to provide answers to the problems of the world. So it is the main occupation of nearly 2 million people, including students in Europe, which makes it one of the largest activities in our continent. Clearly, everybody sees that it's an essential element of our European democratic model. It help withhold the values of Europe, and you help provide the evidence that supports better, sounder policymaking, something that we are all very keen on these days. There are lots of debates with economists, but widely considered that research is the most single important contributor to our growth model, in Europe at least. And it's obviously the main source of the knowledge and the solutions that we need to achieve the sustainable development goals and address our societal challenges. What I've seen from your network, it's clearly one of the focus points of your network. So we have recently demonstrated that science, technology, innovation are there to protect humanity with the fight against COVID. and that we hold the prospects of supporting the recovery that will come after this crisis. So research is à le vent en poupe, as we would say in French. So where do we exactly stand with European science today? Actually, not so bad, better than many of us may think. Europe, including the UK and Switzerland in the broad sense, is still one of the world leaders in science. No doubt about that. We account for 20 to 30% of the global investment in research. And it's about the same for the global science output in terms of publications, highly cited publications, and paper and patents. And this has been relatively stable over the last 20 years. Despite the rise of China and other emerging countries, the share of Europe has remained rather stable compared to the US, which has declined. So it's a sign that European science is resilient. Moreover, Europe is the global leader in a number of areas on sustainability, on patenting in climate action, environment, and secure and renewable energy. So where does this performance come from? Clearly, this is a legacy of a long and strong scientific culture that we have all helped to nurture in universities and research institutions. It's a product of these high first-class, high education and research institutions that we host in Europe. And it is, of course, the achievement of hundreds of thousands of researchers that are employed in the public and the private sector. But this performance is also made possible by a clear priority to support research at all levels in Europe, in the member states through public budgets and incentives, in the regions through the regional development programs, and also in the EU through the framework program for research, the structural funds, never to forget about them, and the recent Recovery and Resilience Fund. In the case of EU programs, which I represent, we are both increasing decade after decade the amounts of the framework program, so we reach 95 billion right now, but we're also improving the range of instruments that we have at our disposal. We have gone from collaborative research only to collaborative research, but also main beneficiary grants like with the ERC. So, and the EIC, of course, is the new kid in town with the Horizon Europe work program. So we are ahead of global competitors in scientific collaboration, in the share of scientific output which is open, and in our focus on research on societal challenges. A few figures that you know: 50% of our scientific publications, at least in most member states, are internationally co-authored. 40% of EU publications are freely available through open access one way or another. We're increasingly targeting societal challenges in the areas of health, green and digital transition. And this is, of course, an introduction to the 5 missions that we have just launched, which will focus on the adaptation to climate change, cancer, oceans and waters, climate neutral and smart cities, and clean soils. However, that's always the part where we say we should not be complacent. We still have some work to do to reinforce our scientific and technological base, which is one of the priorities in the treaty, and to achieve the priorities, the broad priorities of Union and of the member states. First, and there are three main points. First, European science innovation is still divided at the scale of the continent, what we call the innovation divide sometimes. And our European innovation ecosystem, a new terminology that you will see more and more in our papers, is still fragmented between the innovation leaders, the followers, the moderate innovators, and the lagging regions. So we see this in the level of R&D expenditure, in the number of scientific publications and highly cited publications, patent applications. They're all concentrated in a few regions in Europe. The patenting activity in health, ICT, climate mitigation technologies also is highly concentrated in a few EU regions. And also quite worrisome is that we have seen recently that the trend is not positive in the least innovative regions. There is a low and declining rate of growth in patent applications. So the EU convergence in technology is maybe halting a little bit. And as regards fragmentation, well, it's difficult to capture, but something which is quite telling is that if you look at the collaborations which lead to patents, well, 3/4 of these collaborations are happening within a single region in Europe. 3/4 within the single region. And if you look at those who imply more than one region from at least 2 different member states, it's only less than 5%. So it's innovation still happening at a very local level, which is good for universities because that innovation is centered around universities, but we need to create more interconnections. Second point is that, well, Europe is still underinvesting in R&D compared to our main partners, including China now, which has overtaken us. And this is despite a long-standing commitment 20 years ago that we've taken to raise our R&D intensity, the share of our GDP invested in R&D, private and public, to 3%. We are at 2.3% in 2019, and this is partly due to the fact that the GDP decreased. So we're far from the 3%. And it's also a sign of the innovation divide, because some countries have made progress and some others have just stagnated, and that increases the divide in Europe. So this underinvestment is both in the public sector and in the private sector. I'm looking at Stephane because I know he's very much focused on the public sector underinvestment. We didn't start from so bad 20 years ago on the public side, but public budgets on R&D have stagnated over the last 20 years. And now they're part of the problem. And that stagnation, of course, can be understood because of the crisis, the multiple crises that we have had, and the budgetary deficits that we have created during this 20 years. And we also have a private expenditure deficit. This has improved a little bit over 20 years, but it's still, on average, not where it should be. And of course, we know it is strongly correlated to the structure of our economy, and that with the structure of the economy that we have in Europe, we cannot really reach the 3%. But that leads to a problem, which is exactly the share of the economy in Europe, which is in high tech and in the digital sector in particular, which are the big spenders and investors in knowledge. It's not that we just want to invest more and more in research, it's just because the spillover effects are so great that we just cannot afford to not be present in the sectors that today are employing researchers and investing in research. So this situation actually reflects our lack of leadership in the digital economy, something that we try to address decade after decade. Third, Europe is still not reaping the full benefit of our scientific leadership in terms of economic growth and innovation, what sometimes we refer to as the European paradox. On a one-to-one basis, European firms invest similar amounts than their counterparts in the US, sometimes even more. It is actually, again, the lack of new and fast-growing companies that become large firms in the new science-driven economic sectors, which is at the heart of this problem. We lack the unicorns, as we say today. It's also due to still insufficient circulation of knowledge and talent between universities and public research institutions on the one hand, and companies on the other. And that knowledge circulation, or knowledge transfer, as we used to call it, it does require to break persistent silos between academic research careers and jobs in the private sector. We need to create more intersectoral mobility. We need to have easier conditions for creating spin-offs from universities. And we need to have better access also to venture capital and larger rounds of investments in venture capital. And finally, we know that we have a very powerful single market, but we also know that our regulations and standards are not necessarily the most innovation-driven, more innovation-prone, because we are a bit more risk-averse and because we tend to move a bit slower. So we need experimentation spaces for new innovative products. And we also need to use public procurement as a leverage to help more innovation get faster on the market. And finally, I realize that I have 4 points, actually not 3. We need to make the European research area a reality. And what we mean by that is we think that the European research area is something that has stayed in Brussels for too long. Now we need to bring the European research area to researchers, universities and companies. Everyone needs to have an opinion about the European research area, not just that this is something somewhere dreamt in Brussels and there's some funding attached to it. No, it's something which is quite important. As you may recall, and the place where we are actually is very good for that, this was launched by Commissioner Philippe Busquin in 2000. And this was meant as the single market for knowledge, ideas and researchers. And then later on, it was enshrined in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union as the key aim of European research policy. So over the years, we have tried to make it work and to make it complete. And recently, we have relaunched the concept with 4 concrete objectives. So the first one is very much the continuation of the efforts of the past. And we call that the continuation of the deepening of the era. And this regards the traditional areas of the European research area, well, research infrastructures, open science, research careers, the modernization of universities, gender equality, inclusiveness, and also the reform of the research assessment system, something that you will be hearing more and more in the coming months and years. The second aspect is a bit new. Actually, the 3 next aspects are new. The first one is that we need to broaden the era. The era cannot stay just on the researchers and research policy. We need to better connect the era to the European higher education area. And universities is really the place which connects the era and the European higher education area. And we now talk about synergies, etc. And we will need really to make that real. And alliances is, of course, our test bed for doing that. But we also need to connect ERA better to the new industrial policy. And we are doing that with the industrial technology roadmaps, technology infrastructures, new IP valorization and knowledge transfer guidelines, etc. The third objective, which is very topical, is actually to spread excellence better across Europe. We need to ensure that all the member states and regions both contribute to and benefit from the best science in Europe. It's part of our model. We're not here about creating hotspots, about working on distributed excellence. We need everyone to contribute to that, but at the same time, everybody must be able to benefit from it. Again, this leads us to the alliances, I'm sorry, which need to be really inclusive and pan-European. And finally, this is the more political objective. We need to better align our priorities and investments across Europe between, well, first look at the EU, between EU instruments, between Horizon Europe, structural funds, the new recovery mechanism, but also between the EU and member states and regional level. So to achieve this, we have made some progress. We have adopted, the Union has adopted, a pact for R&I in Europe. I'd be actually quite pleased to know how many of you have a fairly good understanding of what is behind the pact beyond the term. Maybe I don't want to know, but we have high hopes for the pact. It's something that we hope will be stable for 10 years. We have tried to capture in it the 10 most important values and principles that underpin research or should underpin research in Europe, from the ethical, legal one, scientific freedom, institutional autonomy, etc., to the more we should work in common, we should work in open science mode, etc. But at the same time, we have adopted for the next 3 years a policy agenda with 20 actions, and we're in the process of reviewing the stakeholders and with member states on which of these 20 actions we have at least half of Europe behind us committed to work and to deliver by the end of 24 concrete outcomes. So we're not just saying at the stratospheric level of values and principles, we're really going into the level of actions with expected impacts with a deadline. And we have a new way of working together, ERA governance we call that, but it's basically a new way of working which is more inclusive, co-creative, which involves member states and regions, but also stakeholders better and more intensively than in the past, hopefully. And for that, we have an ERA forum. Some of you are members of that ERA forum, which meets every 2 to 3 weeks. So it's a working forum. It's not just for discussing theoretical things. So to conclude this brief overview of the state of research in Europe, this year and the coming years are really going to be decisive. Well, because these are the last years of the current commission, so we really need to consolidate this before we go into the next commission, but also because we have a lot of things to do. We have concrete and ambitious results to achieve, to uphold common values, work better together and align our priorities. We have to engage more systematically with stakeholders. We have to better integrate policies, research policy with education policy, with industrial policy, but with transport policy, with energy policy, with health policy. We're doing that through the ERA forum and through our policy agenda. We need to achieve higher impact, and networks and alliances such as European University alliances is one of the main ways that we trust will allow us to reach more impact. So a few words about this. So you know that it started with the initiative under Erasmus+, and now we're supporting it with the European Excellence Initiative. Well, these are just the support mechanism. What counts is the European University Alliances. And we are here to raise excellence in science, better valorize knowledge, and improve the competitiveness, the global competitiveness of universities. Together we are stronger. So we're not here to dictate to universities how they should do their work, their business. We're here to support and empower universities, in particular through alliances, to adapt to the changing conditions and to build critical mass. Again, this is linked to the European model, no hotspots, but distributed strength, to produce the knowledge and the skills that we need to shape the sustainable and resilient society and economies that we need to build in the post-crisis world. So why is that? Because our relative weight, and in particular in research-intensive universities globally, is shrinking. Slowly, but it's inevitable. And Brexit did not help. And we need, therefore, to help universities to combine their efforts and to be more outward-looking, to outreach and collaborate, in particular with the next continent on the rise, Africa. Also because our collaborations need to be based on common grounds. We need to promote the common values that we have, our common priorities internally, but externally as well, again, with our partners in Africa. We need to promote academic freedom, institutional autonomy, open education, open science, etc. So all these priorities were on the table 2 years ago, but the current situation and the rate at which it is evolving are making these priorities even more compelling nowadays because of the geopolitical situation, because we see that the technological race is increasing and the markets are closing down, and because we also need to stay on track with the SDGs by 2030, with climate neutrality by 2050. These are the overall EU priorities. So to conclude, and this is the real conclusion, more than ever, we do need alliances and collaboration across networks and across Europe, because that's at the heart of our model, and this is where lies our strength, and you can count on the Commission to continue with the Member States, to continue strengthening that, promoting that, and supporting that. I hope I didn't bore you too much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Renier. And now we're going to go from the big picture or the broader view that's just been presented to us to a more focused approach, and the question of how the CIVIS Alliance tackles or plans to tackle the challenges that are awaiting research in Europe. And we're going to hear a presentation by Professor Philippe Delaporte, who is Vice-Rector for Research at Aix-Marseille Université. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning. So I am very pleased to say a few words about the role and the impact of research and innovation for the building of the alliance, university alliance. And back to a few years ago, when we start to think about what could be the alliance, and before the call was launched, we immediately involved the research and innovation in the process. Unfortunately, the call was not, for good reason, that was not possible to involve directly before the SWAFT call was involved. But it's clear that if we want to give an impact of this alliance, especially for societal challenge, we need to have the 4 pillars of the universities, which is the education, the research, innovation, and the link to the society. You know, we already saw the 4 hubs that are addressed by CIVIS, which is health, digital, climate, society, and cities. And for all these hubs, for all these objectives, you need the 4 pillars to do so. So, and the question is, how research and innovation can be involved in the process. What we did for RIS4CIVIS organization, so we select 6 modules. In each module, there is a representative of each university, now the 9 universities. One is dedicated to, can we develop a common research and innovation strategy? Another one is how to share the infrastructure, so the platform, technical platform and digital platform. A third one on how to reinforce the link between academia and business. Then a 4th one on human capital and human resource and career of researcher. Next one on open science. And last but not least, what's the connection with citizen and society for research and innovation? So these 6 modules will run along the 3 years duration of the project. The first step has been the benchmark, what's going on in the university on each topics, what's run well, what is difficult, how to share the best practice. So we have completed this first step. Then the following step is, based on this benchmarking, can we build something which is shared by all the partners? And then we launched yesterday, that was our first real meeting with real person, the last step, which is going to run until the end of the project, which we select some case study, and this case study on the 6th module will be developed until the end of the project to see if these selected topics can be implemented in each university, and to have a feedback. Does it work? What are the difficulties? And so on. And then the output will be the CIVIS research and innovation strategy, and what kind of transformation model we can implement concretely, not only in theory, but concretely, thanks to the study case. So that was the general approach of RIS4CIVIS. That's nice. That's a good process. We are happy about it. Now the main difficulty is how to engage people, because you saw in the first presentation the number of researchers and people in the 8 and now 10 university, and how to motivate people to be part of this process. That's the next challenge we have. And our populations that we want to deal with are scientists, researchers, not only, but at least. And in fact, they are, you know, in the real life, you don't look for problem. You want to enjoy life, you want to practice sport, you want to visit museum, you want to have a civic engagement and so on. No, for the scientists, they want to have problem. If they don't have problem, they are jobless. So you can say problem, we can say challenge. They say challenge. So our challenge is to give them problem. So we need to engage them. We need to feed that curiosity. And when they have the problem, we need to help them to address their need. And I think if we want to engage researchers in the process must help them to feed their curiosity and to address their needs. So what we did since the beginning, before the study case will be the next step. We try to address these 2 points. So the first one, and say, okay, they don't know each other because there are 8 universities. So we are going to let's say, to make a conference, because I remember you that when we launched RIS4CIVIS and CIVIS, that was the COVID period, and that's not easy for a mobility program. On the other hand, all the communication tools came and became part of our life, of our daily life. So we say we are going to implement a seminar every 2 weeks, high-level seminar from one university, and with a communication over the 8 universities, like that they can learn what are the topics and what are the challenges in the 8 universities. For sure, not for everybody, but for people of the tools. And to be honest, because we need to be honest if we want to, it hasn't been a real success. Because in parallel of these communication tools, that means researchers receive a lot of solicitation. They have many, they can spend their day in front of the screen to listen conference. So that was, we didn't get the impact that we were supposed to have that. So we still look for some other way to communicate, to share. A good feedback was, a good success was the CIVIS 3i, which is a little bit at the interface of feeding their curiosity, because that's a co-fund program for postdoc, which are going to move between the University of CIVIS. And so that will promote the exchange and of knowledge between the university, but at the same time that feeds their need, because that's a postdoc which is going to work on the problem. So that's at the interface of the 2 challenge. And it works well, as we have something like 300 applications for the first call, which is huge. Now we have to face the challenge for the selection of the 300 applications, but and the review process. But at least that's nice to have the engagement of about that. Another very good process that we implement is the Task Force Europe. So all the representatives of the European officer and in the 8 universities are meet quite frequently, and when there is a call, they try to build program, to build project to answer to the call. So because they know their ecosystem and they can try to promote. So again, that's a quite good success. And directly for sharing, again, to address their researcher need, we can let's say, correlate that to the module. So with the module 2 about the platform, we are going to give them access not only of the platform of their university, but the platform and the system of the other universities. That's one of the challenge. We have some local initiative and program and site to support the partnership between academia and business. So we have access to some business need of other country, and that again extend the connection between the partnership. And we launch some. We answer to some call about the ecosystem of innovation related to that between the CIVIS partner. Again, for attractivity. We share best practice about transferable skill training for researchers. We provide some supporting tool for open science. And again, about best practice, experience and methodology for citizen science projects, which are not at the same level in each university. So that's the next challenge we have that we launched yesterday for the last part of the project, which is still running for more than 1.5 years for the study case. And based on that, we expect we will be able to have a common research and innovation agenda for the RIS4CIVIS. And to conclude, I go back to the 5 societal challenge of CIVIS. And if we want to bring concrete answer to this societal challenge, it's clear that we need to have an interdisciplinary research, and it's easier to have an interdisciplinary research if the community is broader. We need to create an ecosystem and innovation, so that's part of RIS4CIVIS too. We need to increase the link between the academia and business, to involve the citizen, and for sure, maybe the most important, because we need to educate, to form and to educate the next generation of people to answer the societal challenge. So we have to set the student at the heart of all this interaction. So thank you for your attention.